Now, to understand what Paul was dealing with, we have to go back to Romans 10 and verse 3. We have to read this whole scripture in context here. For they, being ignorant of God's righteousness, and going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. You see, Paul was dealing with people who thought they could be justified, and the word justified just means made right with God. How do you get right with God? Okay, Paul was dealing with people who thought they could get right with God by works of the law. That's what Paul was addressing here. And so then he says, Christ, a better way to understand this is like this. For Christ is the end of works of law for righteousness to everyone who believes. You know, if you're trying to make yourself right with God by works, by what you do, by works of the law, that's a dead-end street. No, you're made right by God's grace and unconditional forgiveness. That's how you're made right with God. You don't earn anything by keeping the law of God. That's not how you get right with God. Now, does that mean we shouldn't keep the law? Well, who in their right mind would come up with that? I mean, how do you come up with that kind of insanity? Well, we don't need to keep it then. It doesn't make sense. You see, this is what Paul was addressing. People who thought they could be made right with God by their works. Now listen closely, what I'm about to say. There's a big difference between keeping the law of God in order to make yourself right in the eyes of God and keeping the law of God simply because it's the right thing to do. Let me put it another way. Are you faithful to your wife? If you're a man, are you faithful to, now don't answer that out loud. I mean, you say the wrong thing, you may get the frying pan across the head, bang, you know. Are you faithful? Okay, hopefully you are faithful to you. Now, are you faithful? Now, if you're faithful to your wife, you are keeping the seventh commandment, by the way. Are you faithful because you're trying to earn brownie points with God? You're trying to get right with God. You're trying to earn your own salvation. No, that's not why you're keeping the seventh commandment. You're faithful to your wife because it makes your life work. You don't want to get STDs. You don't want to have to pay child support until, on 4 different children until they turn 18 because your wife just divorced you. You don't want, you want a functional marriage that works. And that's why you're faithful. It makes your life work. You're just doing it because it's the right thing to do. You're not trying to earn anything with God. And this is the role of the law. It makes your life work. I have zero tolerance for people who call themselves Christians and believe they don't have to keep the 10 Commandments. I mean, if you were to ask, should a Christian nation keep the commandments, the 10 Commandments? Should a Christian, should a society, should a people keep the 10 Commandments? Who in their right mind would say, no, they shouldn't?
Check us out on the web at isthatreallyinthebible.com.